Welcome to the Funeral Channel Network podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's always great to be here.
So today we are getting into a deep dive that, honestly, it tackles something we all have to deal with eventually, but we almost never want to think about it until we absolutely have to.
Right. Yeah, it's the ultimate deferred purchase. I mean, no one really shops around for this stuff for fun.
Exactly. Just imagine you are about to make what is arguably, the most inevitable, unavoidable purchase of your entire life. You've just lost someone. You're navigating this heavy, totally disorienting grief.
Which is overwhelming enough on its own.
Right. But almost immediately, you are forced to pivot. You are thrust headfirst into this incredibly complex market, and suddenly you are essentially acting as a project manager for a major logistical operation.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. You become a project manager overnight.
And you're dealing with heavy industrial infrastructure, strict environmental regulations, and these rapidly shifting technological trends. It's a profound paradox, really. You're managing your own grief, but you're also, managing a localized supply chain.
It's a lot. And the options are changing so fast right now.
They really are. So for this deep dive, we are grounding our conversation in an incredibly detailed industry briefing provided by the Funeral Program site. They are a trusted provider of funeral education and memorial products.
And the briefing they provided is just packed with really eye-opening market realities.
Totally. It outlines the current end-of-life market options. And our mission today is to zero in on a rapidly growing economic question within this multi-billion-dollar death care industry.
Which is the financial reality of aquamation versus traditional flame cremation.
Yes, exactly. Is this new eco-friendly aquamation actually more expensive than traditional fire cremation? And if so, why?
Spoiler alert, it is more expensive.
Right, yeah. But the why is the fascinating part. We are exploring the economics of innovation, the friction of municipal zoning laws, and this completely hidden infrastructure that keeps the death care industry functioning.
Because the tension here, it's entirely rooted in the collision of emerging technology and legacy infrastructure.
Which is a story we see in tech all the time, just not usually, in this specific industry.
Exactly. When families look at the market today, they immediately see a stark price disparity. Traditional flame cremation sits in a highly predictable range of, say, $1,000 to $3,000.
Okay, so that's the baseline.
Right. But then aquamation demands a significant premium. It typically ranges from $2,000 to $5,000.
Wow, so you could be looking at double the cost.
Easily. And that price gap isn't just some arbitrary markup. It is a perfect encapsulation of how new technologies struggle to penetrate established, deeply entrenched markets.
So it's about the economics of actually breaking into the industry.
Exactly. It's a story about capital expenditures, regulatory capture, and economies of scale.
Okay, so to understand the premium of this new technology, we really have to dissect the incumbent first. I mean, flame cremation is the undisputed heavyweight champion of the modern death care industry.
Without a doubt, it is the default for so many families now.
And that $1,000 to $3,000 price tag is obviously highly attractive to consumers. But, as the source points out, that affordability is the direct result of a century of invisible subsidies.
Invisible subsidies is a great way to think about it.
Right. It operates a lot like the internal combustion engine relative to our modern transportation grid.
Oh, that's a fascinating comparison. How so?
Well, think about it. If you buy a standard gas-powered car today, it is relatively affordable and infinitely convenient because there's literally a gas station on every corner.
Sure, yeah. You never have to worry about where to fill up.
But that convenience only exists because previous generations effectively subsidized the massive initial research, the development, the entire infrastructure build-out.
They paid for the roads, the underground storage tanks, all of that.
Exactly. The complex refinery networks. The modern consumer is just coasting on a century of pre-built, amortized infrastructure. And flame cremation is basically the internal combustion engine of the funeral industry.
That is so true. That historical amortization is the core driver of the low price point today. The capital expenditures that were required to develop the first generations of cremation retorts.
A retort is the actual chamber, right?
Yes, the cremation chamber. The cost to develop those initially was huge, but it has long since been absorbed by the market. Today, the manufacturing of these highly specialized chambers is completely optimized.
So they aren't reinventing the wheel every time they build one.
Not at all. The supply chains for the refractory bricks, the industrial burners, the digital control systems, it's all mature and highly standardized.
Which means maintenance is probably way cheaper, too.
Oh, absolutely. If a heating element fails in a retort in some mid-sized town, the facility doesn't have to, fly in a specialized engineer from overseas.
Right, they just call a local guy.
Exactly. There's likely a certified technician within a 50-mile radius, and the standardized replacement parts are just sitting on a shelf in a regional distribution center. So the operational risk for the facility owner is incredibly low.
And that low operational risk directly translates to a lower barrier to entry for the business owner, which, then triggers market competition.
Precisely. High competition means lower prices for the consumer.
Because the equipment is relatively affordable to purchase and maintain, and because the zoning precedents for crematories were fought and settled decades ago, you can have a massive number of facilities operating in a single geographic area.
Yeah, you might have 4 or 5 different funeral homes in a single medium-sized city, all offering the exact same flame cremation service.
Either in-house or through a shared local network.
Right. And because of that, they're forced into a race to the bottom on pricing.
Makes sense.
A high density of providers offering a commoditized service naturally drives the consumer cost down to that baseline. Furthermore, that high density creates immense logistical efficiencies.
Like with transportation and scheduling.
Exactly. A funeral director doesn't need to arrange for a body to be transported across state lines just to find a functional facility. The transport distance is minimal, scheduling is completely routine, and the fuel and labor costs associated with that transport are pretty negligible.
And in any logistical operation, minimizing time and distance in the supply chain directly preserves capital.
Exactly. It keeps the costs low across the board.
But, beyond the sheer economics, the source material really highlights that there is a massive psychological component to this established infrastructure.
Oh, absolutely. The psychological aspect is huge.
Families frequently default to traditional cremation simply because it is familiar. When a person is grieving, their cognitive load is entirely maxed out.
Yeah, you're just trying to get through the day.
Right. Executive functioning is severely impaired. The brain is aggressively seeking the path of least resistance just to conserve energy. So when a funeral director outlines the standard, predictable timeline of a flame cremation, it offers this tangible sense of control in a moment of total chaos.
And predictability is a profoundly valuable commodity in the death care space. The family does not need to learn the underlying physics of a cremation retort.
Yeah, nobody wants a science lesson while they're planning a funeral.
Exactly.
What?
They don't have to explain some novel scientific process to an octogenarian relative at the memorial service. It is a known quantity, both culturally and logistically.
So it's safe.
Right. The traditional method defends its market share not just by being the cheapest option on the spreadsheet, but by requiring the absolute minimum amount of cognitive processing from a consumer who is already operating at a deficit.
That makes so much sense. So the incumbent clearly holds the high ground. It is cheap, ubiquitous, and culturally frictionless. But the industry is currently facing a formidable challenger, right? One that completely upends this century-old grid.
Yes, and this brings us to alkaline hydrolysis.
Which is commercially marketed as aquamation or water cremation.
Exactly. And the leap from a $3,000 ceiling for flame to a $5,000 ceiling for aquamation is massive.
Yeah, you are effectively doubling the cost for the consumer in some cases, which means we need to do a deep dive into the physical reality of the technology to understand why.
And the physical reality is heavily industrial. Alkaline hydrolysis utilizes water, strong alkaline chemicals, typically potassium hydroxide or sodium hydroxide heat, and in many systems, significant pressurization.
To do what exactly?
To chemically accelerate the natural decomposition process. Think about it this way. If you bury organic material in the earth, the natural alkalinity of the soil, combined with moisture and bacterial action, will break it down over the course of decades.
Okay, so it's a natural process over a long time.
Right. Aquamation isolates that exact chemical mechanism and compresses those decades into a time frame of anywhere from 3 to 16 hours.
Wow, 3 to 16 hours. That is a massive acceleration. But this is where the marketing terminology creates a really fascinating disconnect with the operational reality.
Oh, the branding is completely different from the engineering.
Right. The term water cremation, it evokes this imagery of, I don't know, A gentle river, a babbling brook, something completely natural and effortless. It sounds really passive.
It does. It sounds very zen.
But the physical infrastructure required to safely execute this process is essentially a high-tech biolaboratory. We are talking about highly engineered, pressurized stainless steel vessels.
Capable of safely containing highly corrosive alkaline solutions at temperatures approaching 300 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wait, 300 degrees? That doesn't sound like a gentle brook.
Not at all. The engineering tolerances required for these machines are extraordinary, and that is exactly where the initial capital expenditure explodes.
Because it's so complex to build.
Exactly. You are dealing with highly volatile parameters. A traditional retort relies on immense heat and airflow, which is dangerous, sure, but the engineering is straightforward. It's basically a very intense oven.
Right, fire is pretty simple at its core.
But an alkaline hydrolysis machine must perfectly balance fluid dynamics, chemical concentrations, internal pressure, and heat distribution. And it has to do all of that while maintaining absolute structural integrity against a highly caustic internal environment.
So the machines themselves are vastly more expensive than a traditional retort.
Oh, magnitudes more expensive.
But according to the briefing from the funeral program site, the machine is just the starting point. You can't just wheel a stainless steel pressure vessel into a converted garage and plug it into a 110-volt outlet.
No, definitely not. The facility upgrades required to support this machinery are extensive.
So what does a funeral home actually have to do to install one?
Well, a facility must undergo a near-total overhaul of its plumbing and structural footprint. They have to install commercial-grade piping capable of handling specific temperatures and chemical compositions without corroding.
That alone sounds like a massive plumbing bill.
It is. And the flooring often must be reinforced to handle the immense static weight of a fully loaded water chamber. We're talking thousands of pounds of water and steel.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about the weight of the water.
Yeah, it's significant.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the personnel cannot simply transition from operating a flame retort to operating an aquamation system.
Because the skills don't transfer.
Right. The chemistry, the safety protocols, the fluid handling, and the maintenance routines are entirely different. So the facility must invest heavily in specialized staff retraining.
Okay, so the funeral homes that are adopting this technology right now, they are absorbing the entire cost of the R&D, the specialized manufacturing, the facility teardowns, and the training.
Exactly. They are the early adopters taking on all the friction.
And because the capital requirements are so high, very few businesses are willing or even able to take that risk, which inherently creates these geographical monopolies, right?
Yes, and that is a huge factor in the pricing.
If a facility invests $500,000 to become the sole aquamation provider within, say, a 300-mile radius, they are completely insulated from local price competition.
They essentially command the market rate, and the consumer absorbs that initial capital expenditure.
It is the exact inverse of the traditional cremation market, where there's a guy on every corner.
Exactly. But, the physical hardware and the specialized training actually pale in comparison to the most significant bottleneck these early adopters face.
Really? More expensive than a stainless steel pressure chamber.
Yes. The true cost of innovation in this sector is driven by the invisible regulatory framework surrounding the technology. Facilities attempting to offer aquamation are forced to navigate a brutal dual burden of regulation.
A dual burden. Okay, so we are looking at a direct collision here between private, intimate funeral care and highly utilitarian municipal infrastructure.
That's exactly what it is.
Historically, a funeral director only really had to answer to their state board of mortuary science. And that board cares about, the sanitary handling of remains, chain of custody, embalming fluid standards, general professional ethics.
Right. That is the funeral director's home turf. They know how to navigate that bureaucracy with their eyes closed.
But aquamation introduces a completely foreign regulatory body into the funeral home's operations, doesn't it?
It does. Suddenly they have to deal with the municipal wastewater management district.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. The alkaline hydrolysis process produces a sterile liquid effluent. It is a highly complex solution of amino acids, peptides, sugars, and salts. And all of that must be discharged into the local municipal sewer system.
So suddenly, the funeral director is no longer just a mortician. They basically have to become an amateur wastewater engineer.
Exactly. And municipal water boards, they do not care about the dignity of the dead or the grieving process.
No, they just care about the pipes.
Right. Their sole mandate is protecting the biochemical balance of the local water treatment plant. They are looking at the effluent and measuring the pH levels, the temperature, and the biochemical oxygen demand, or BOD.
BOD, what does that mean in this context?
It's basically a measure of how much oxygen the bacteria in the water treatment plant will need to break down the organic material in the effluent. If a business dumps a large volume of high-temperature, high BOD effluent into the sewer, it can actually shock the bacterial colonies at the treatment plant.
Oh, the bacteria that are responsible for breaking down the city's municipal waste.
Exactly. So obtaining the permits to discharge that effluent is a massive legal and political undertaking.
I can imagine. Is the funeral industry uniquely resistant to this kind of technological change just because it's so heavily regulated on multiple fronts like this?
It definitely slows things down. The funeral homeowner often has to present their case at open city council meetings or utility board hearings.
Oh man, standing in front of a city council trying to explain water cremation?
It's not easy. They have to provide highly technical engineering schematics to municipal bureaucrats who likely have never even heard of the process.
And they probably have to overcome the inevitable instinctual public aversion, right? The idea of human remains entering the water system.
Yes, the yuck factor is real. Even though the effluent is completely sterile and chemically indistinguishable from other biological waste streams, the public perception is a huge hurdle.
And according to the source, this isn't just a one-and-done permitting process.
No, not at all. Once they secure the initial approval, they are locked into a permanent cycle of compliance monitoring.
Right. They may be required to install expensive, continuous monitoring equipment on their discharge pipes.
Just to prove their effluent remains within the legally mandated pH and temperature ranges 247.
And they might be subjected to higher commercial utility rates or specialized industrial discharge tariffs. They have to retain legal counsel to continually renew these specialized variances.
It's a lot of ongoing administrative overhead.
Yeah.
And all of that is baked directly into the $5,000 price point.
So the regulatory friction acts as this massive, invisible barrier to entry. In an industry defined by absolute zero tolerance for error, regulators are inherently conservative.
Always. They will always default to the strictest possible interpretation of the law.
Which ensures that only the most heavily capitalized, legally sophisticated funeral homes can even attempt to bring aquamation to market right now.
Exactly. It keeps the pool of providers artificially small.
But despite all of that, despite the high consumer cost, the limited geographic availability and the intense regulatory friction, consumers are actively seeking this out.
They really are. The demand is growing steadily.
They are looking at a $1,000 option and a $5,000 option, and a growing segment is deliberately choosing the more expensive route.
Which goes against basic economic logic, usually.
Right. The economic driver here is fascinating. It revolves entirely around the concept of the green premium. The consumer is essentially paying a significant markup to explicitly not produce a tangible byproduct.
Yes. The core of the green premium is the internalization of external costs.
Can you break that down a bit?
Sure. Traditional flame cremation externalizes its environmental impact. The combustion process requires a massive consumption of fossil fuels, typically natural gas, and it releases significant carbon dioxide directly into the atmosphere.
How much carbon are we talking about?
A single traditional cremation can produce the carbon equivalent of driving a car several hundred miles.
Oh, wow. Just for one person.
Yes. Furthermore, there are historical and ongoing concerns regarding the emission of vaporized heavy metals, particularly mercury from older dental amalgam fillings.
Right, I've heard about that.
While modern industrial scrubbers have definitely reduced these emissions, the fundamental reality remains. Combustion creates airborne pollutants.
So when a consumer pays $5,000 for aquamation, they are purchasing a negative space. They are investing heavily to ensure their final physical act does not involve the release of carbon dioxide or heavy metals into the atmosphere.
Exactly. They are paying for what isn't there.
You know, it is functionally identical to the early adoption curve of electric vehicles.
Oh, it's a perfect analogy.
Right. Early EV buyers paid a massive upfront premium, and it wasn't for better performance or luxury interiors necessarily. It was for the distinct lack of a tailpipe.
They voluntarily paid more to internalize the cost of their own emissions.
And aquamation is operating on the exact same economic principle within the death care space.
It is. And the demographic shift driving this specific economic behavior is really undeniable.
We're talking about millennials and Gen Z, right?
Yes. We are seeing a massive transfer of decision-making power to younger generations who are now entering the phase of life where they are either managing end-of-life care for their parents, or they're actually pre-planning for themselves.
And these are cohorts that have been thoroughly steeped in climate awareness since they were kids.
Exactly. Environmental sustainability is not just a secondary consideration for them. It is a primary lens through which they evaluate all market interactions.
So the traditional death care industry, which, let's be honest, relies heavily on formaldehyde-based embalming fluids, non-biodegradable steel and fiberglass caskets, concrete burial vaults, and carbon-intensive incinerators, it is fundamentally misaligned with the core values of this incoming consumer base.
Completely misaligned. The demand for an alternative was inevitable.
But what is truly interesting in the briefing from the funeral program site is how the industry is pivoting to meet this demand. They are morphing from simply offering a biological disposition service to curating a comprehensive, eco-conscious lifestyle brand.
Oh, the branding shift is massive right
Oh,
now.
so, like, what does that actually look like for the consumer?
Well, the market is aggressively adapting by bundling the core technology with highly specialized ancillary products. Funeral homes that offer aquamation, they rarely sell it just as a standalone industrial process.
Right, they aren't just selling the use of the machine.
Exactly. They integrate it into a broader green death package. After the hydrolysis process, you're left with sterile bone fragments. These are dried, pulverized, and returned to the family, much like traditional ashes. But the presentation is entirely curated.
Oh, okay, so it's about the packaging.
Yes, we see these remains packaged with biodegradable urns designed to dissolve in the ocean, or they're integrated into root balls for memorial tree planting ceremonies.
So the industry is selling a cohesive narrative of returning seamlessly to the earth.
Exactly, it's an entire experience.
And there is a deep psychological marketing component at play here too, specifically regarding the emotional perception of the elements. Families consistently report feeling that aquamation is a, quote, gentler process.
Which is fascinating when you think about the actual science.
Right, because when you break it down logically, both flame cremation and alkaline hydrolysis are extreme, highly destructive industrial processes. One uses 1,000-degree fire, the other uses pressurized caustic chemicals.
Neither is particularly gentle from a physics standpoint.
Yet the human brain inherently categorizes water as nurturing and fire as violent.
We have deeply embedded archetypal associations with these elements. Across almost all cultures and mythologies, fire is associated with destruction, purification through pain, aggression, and sudden, irreversible finality.
Yeah, fire is scary.
But water is universally associated with life, the womb, washing, erosion, and gentle rebirth. So the conceptual framework of a body being dissolved by warm water over several hours feels infinitely more peaceful to a grieving mind than the visceral imagery of a body being subjected to an open flame.
And the marketing naturally leans heavily into these deeply ingrained archetypes.
Of course it does. It's a very powerful selling point.
But, and this is a big but, this transition toward heavily branded, emotionally curated eco-packages presents a very real financial trap for the consumer.
It absolutely does. You have to be so careful.
Because when a family is operating under that cognitive fog of grief we talked about, and they are seeking the comfort of a gentle green exit, they are highly vulnerable to aggressive upselling.
Extremely vulnerable.
They might walk in intending just to pay for the alkaline hydrolysis process, but walk out having purchased an entire suite of premium-priced eco-accessories.
Which is why the unbundling of the quoted price is the single most critical task for a consumer in this market. The Federal Trade Commission's funeral rule strictly mandates that funeral providers give consumers an itemized general price list.
Right, a GPL.
Yes, but the complexity of these new eco-packages can really obscure the baseline costs. If a facility quotes $5,000 for a green memorial package, the consumer must rigidly dissect that figure.
Right, like what are you actually paying for?
Exactly. You have to ask, how much of that is the actual utilization of the stainless steel pressure vessel? How much is the transportation of the body? How much are the specialized municipal wastewater permits?
And critically, how much is the markup on the artisanal biodegradable urn?
Yes, because the halo effect of the eco-conscious label allows businesses to command vastly higher profit margins on ancillary goods.
Right, a bamboo urn might cost the funeral home a fraction of the price of a standard brass urn, but because it fulfills the environmental values of the consumer, it can be sold at a massive premium.
Exactly. The consumer has to maintain total clarity regarding what they are actually purchasing. Are they buying the innovative technology itself or just the emotional branding surrounding it?
That is such an important distinction. So we are currently observing the friction of this early adoption phase. The prices are high, the regulations are hostile, and the market is fragmented.
It's the classic early-stage technology landscape.
But if we project this out over a 10-year horizon, what happens? Because the source material suggests a pretty radical stabilization.
It does. The prediction from industry experts is that aquamation availability will expand significantly over the next decade. And as competition increases, the consumer pricing will gradually compress.
Okay, so to map that future trajectory, we only really need to look at the historical precedent of flame cremation itself, right?
Yes, the history of flame cremation is the perfect roadmap for this.
Because in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, flame cremation was considered a radical, borderline taboo practice in Western culture.
It was fiercely opposed by various religious institutions.
Hmm.
It was generally accessible only to the very wealthy or the, eccentric.
Right. The first crematories, like the famous one built in Washington, Pennsylvania in 1876, they were massive, expensive undertakings that faced intense public skepticism.
Very similar to the municipal pushback we see with acclimation today.
Exactly. But the macroeconomic realities of the time forced a shift. As urbanization accelerated, urban cemetery space became incredibly scarce and prohibitively expensive.
Right, cities are running out of room.
So the sheer, undeniable logistical efficiency of cremation eventually overwhelmed the cultural taboo. As more facilities were built, the technology of the retorts improved, the manufacturing became standardized, and the regulatory bodies developed standardized frameworks for oversight.
The initial extreme friction slowly evaporated, and that drove the price down and pushed adoption rates from single digits way up to the 60% or higher we see in many areas today.
So aquamation is currently sitting at the exact same point on the adoption curve that flame cremation occupied a century ago.
Exactly. It is squarely in the innovator and early adopter phase. But if we project 10 years into the future, assuming the consumer demand for green alternatives continues to compound, the entire ecosystem will look vastly different.
So how does that play out practically?
Well, the manufacturing of the alkaline hydrolysis machines will inevitably scale. Right now, they're effectively bespoke, low-volume pieces of highly specialized equipment.
Like custom-built cars.
Right. But in a decade, as the total addressable market expands, larger industrial manufacturers will enter the space. Assembly lines will optimize, parts will standardize, and the sheer cost of the hardware will plummet.
And what about the regulatory side?
Simultaneously, the regulatory environment will mature. The current bespoke battles with local water boards that we talked about, those will be replaced by standardized state-level permitting templates.
Oh, so they won't have to fight it out city by city anymore.
Exactly. The administrative friction will largely disappear.
And once the capital expenditures and the regulatory overhead decrease, the barrier to entry for local funeral homes basically collapses.
Yes. You will suddenly have 3 or 4 facilities in a single town offering the service.
And those geographical monopolies will break. The natural forces of price competition will just take over.
Right. And then the question isn't just whether the $5,000 price tag will drop to meet the $3,000 flame baseline. The real question is whether it will eventually undercut it.
Wait, really? You think water could become cheaper than fire?
From a purely operational standpoint, it is highly probable.
Walk me through that.
Well, once the initial infrastructure is paid off, think about the day-to-day operational expenditures of an aquamation cycle. You're using water, relatively inexpensive alkaline chemical agents, and the electricity required to heat and circulate the system.
Okay.
Theoretically, that could run much lower than the cost of consuming massive volumes of natural gas to sustain a 1,000-degree fire for several hours, especially as fossil fuel prices continue to face long-term upward pressure from environmental policies.
Oh, wow, that makes perfect sense. So the premium, luxury, eco-conscious option of today could very well become the baseline, budget-friendly utilitarian standard of tomorrow.
It really could.
Oh,
It
yeah.
completely recontextualizes how we view the death care market.
It does. We are basically watching a fundamental clash between a mature, highly optimized legacy infrastructure that relies on carbon-heavy combustion and an emerging capital-intensive technology that promises zero emissions.
And the modern consumer just has to navigate this transition with acute awareness.
Yeah, they really do. They have to balance their immediate emotional needs, their core environmental values, and their strict economic realities, all against this rapidly shifting industrial backdrop.
It's a lot to ask of someone who is grieving. They are making a deeply personal choice, but they are executing it within a complex logistical matrix.
Exactly. So to bring this all together, the choice between water and fire is currently defined by friction. It is a choice between the path of least resistance, which is cheap, familiar, traditional, and the premium cost of internalizing your own environmental impact.
It's a profound shift in how we handle our final footprint.
It is. But stepping back from the stainless steel, the zoning board hearings and the fluctuating prices of natural gas, there is a really profound philosophical reality at the center of this industry.
There really is.
If the ultimate objective of these emerging technologies is to allow us to dissolve seamlessly back into the earth, to leave absolutely no physical or chemical trace behind, how does the specific mechanism we choose to achieve that vanishing reflect the values we held while we were here?
That's the real question.
Right. Does the final economic transaction we make, the way we orchestrate our own disappearance, say more about who we were, or does it say more about the environment we are desperately hoping to preserve for the people we leave behind?
It's a heavy thought.
It is. It's definitely something to mull over. Well, that wraps up our analysis for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.